Howdy, folks. Welcome to, I guess this is episode 2 of the Bad Gamepad podcast show thing. I am Super Koopa, and I'm joined with my good friend, Artful Thinking. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Artful Thinking is, he's a bit of a staple around here. We pretty much grew up together, and I know the last time we had Troll on, he was our first guest, and me and Artful, we go way back. I mean, we go into elementary school together pretty much, and
Yeah, we've known each other for, what is it now, 22 years?
oh, geez, I don't even know, but I'm assuming that's the case because I mean, he's 28 now and I'm 30, so we're both
Yeah.
realizing the horrific nature of being adults. We're both coming to grips with that horrifying reality of crippling adulthood. It's like, oh yay, taxes, wonderful. But yeah, in today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of different topics. I've got a couple of things that we can bring to mind. The first would be talking about some of the trailers for the Super Mario Brother movie. Our thoughts on that, being longtime Mario. It's safe to say you're a fan of Mario, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so we're both basically, and obviously, if my name wasn't a dead giveaway, I mean, we're pretty much diehard Mario guys that have played since we were kids. So talk a little bit about that, maybe bring up some other Nintendo related topics, and then ultimately what we're playing, which I figure we'll start off with right now.
Yeah.
Recently, and I have actually purchased some games recently. I purchased 2 games recently. The first is an indie game by the name of Infernax. I was browsing Instagram and I saw on my local game store that they had a physical copy of this game, and the artwork looked pretty cool, and I was like, I wonder what this is. And what it is it is a Metroidvania in the visual style of Castlevania 2, but
Okay.
it is in many ways a parody of several different games of that era. Like there's references to Contra, I believe, and there's also references to Doom. There's a reference to Mario 2. All sorts of just random sort of classic gaming references. It's mostly like a parody game. I got sucked into it, and I'm on currently my 3rd playthrough.
Oh, wow.
It is. I will say this. I think it's fantastic, but I want to put out a disclaimer. It is dark. It is humorous, but it is dark as it is a 16-bit game, but
Who would have guessed with the name Infernax?
it is extraordinarily gory.
Yeah.
Enemies basically. I mean, there's
I mean, if you're going to be parodying Doom, I would assume it would be.
oh yeah, it is. So to sum it up, basically the premise of the game is that you play as a character that is a crusader called I believe it's Elsidor. He's a crusader. He's like a Simon Belmont basically, but he's a crusader returning home, and he finds that hell has actually erupted on Earth. So that's much of the Doom reference, because it's demonic entities, which is strange to me, because it's like it fits, but at the same time it's like it is very Doom-esque, because it's mostly monstrous creatures. Like there's all sorts of like mostly like zombies and ghouls, and but the underlying story is basically a cult has basically invited all of these, and they've taken over about 5 castles in the overall overworld of the map. And it's
Okay.
played out. You go from one of the castles to the other, and you fight all the bosses, and then you fight the final boss and you beat it. But the thing about this game, and the reason it warrants multiple playthroughs, is there's several very neat things they do. The first thing is that, based on what your name is, can affect which weapon you use. So if you use the standard character name that comes with it, or any name that you can come up with, you basically use your standard weapon, which is a mace and a shield. if you type in, say, variations, like there's a game called Sword Seedor, you get a long sword without a shield, and that's what you play with through the entire game. And your weapon upgrades reflect that too. They're basically they're the same for each weapon, but they're for that weapon version, if that makes any sense. So the upgrades stay the same, but they're just like, instead of it being a mace upgrade, it's a sword upgrade. So it's the same number. All of that stays the same. It's really cool, and I've gotten sucked into it because there's so many Easter eggs and parody stuff. Like some of the stuff you unlock, there's a cheat system where you can have like invincibility and infinite jumps, and there's one to where you can have outrageous gore. It's super 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 fun, and I've been just really really enjoying it. Again, it's called Infernax on the Nintendo eShop. It's $20, but it's also available, I believe, on PC and the other consoles as well, Xbox and I believe PlayStation as well. Really really fun. The second game I'm playing is much older, but it's also an indie game, and it's one that many people are already probably pretty familiar with. It's called Moonlighter.
Oh yeah.
I had gotten the demo of it earlier this year, and I was not terribly impressed with it, and I didn't play it very long. But I saw it was on sale for like $5, so I was like, you know what? If I'm going to experience it, why not go for the full thing? I installed it, and basically, it's a roguelike dungeon crawler slash shop management game.
That's a fun game.
You have played it?
Yeah, I have it.
Yeah, okay. I'm gonna actually disagree with you on the fun part, at least to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
Visually gorgeous. Like the style and the storytelling, very nice, but I am not a fan of the combat.
Out of curiosity, did you play Hades?
I did.
Did you enjoy Hades?
I did.
That's really interesting because
You feel
is very similar to me.
interesting because I didn't feel that at all. I loved Hades. Don't get me wrong. Now I can, if I really think about it, Hades does have a bit of a weight to its combat, but I feel like Moonlighter, the thing at least, and it might just be the stage I'm at in the game, being early on, but Moonlighter feels like the pack that you have on your back. You feel it.
Yeah.
Like when you're swinging your sword around, it feels like you're swinging your sword around with a heavy pack on your back.
I think part of that is, and I think this is what the big difference between Hades and Moonlighter is. With Hades, when you die, you keep every, like, all the coins and all that you picked up.
Yeah, and you don't lose. Yeah, you don't really lose anything.
Whereas with Moonlighter, the moment you die, anything that's not in your, like, little, like, quick slot inventory section, you lose.
Yeah, that's another thing too. And early on, trying to there's a couple of different ways to get coins, but it's very much a grind to get.
Oh, absolutely. And so I think that's one of the things that, like, while I do really find the game to be enjoyable, I think that's one of the things that makes the game difficult and hard to keep going is the fact that the upgrading process for the game, there's so much of a grind to it because of the things that they incorporated, like the shop side of it and trying to be like, oh, collect different items and such. And so you're also then dealing with RNG in terms of what something drops.
Right. Yeah, ultimately, like, it's not a bad or broken game. It is just I still don't, like, I'm still playing it, but I'm not clicking with it, like, not nearly as much. Like, if I had to choose between playing that and playing Infernax, I'm going instantly to Infernax. And the thing about Infernex is, as a Christian, I'm sure some people are going to ask me. It's like, well, how do you feel about playing games that have like these themes of your enemies being demonic? And I'm like, honestly, I don't mind dark themes as much. The one thing about Infernex is that it is multiple choice in terms of your morality. There's a morality system, so
Hmm.
you can choose to be the ultra righteous hero. Like there's actually there's um like half a dozen, like there's six or so endings, possibly
Yeah.
more. Like you can choose an ultimate good ending where you just eradicate the cult and all the evil forces, or you can you can choose to side with the cult and ultimately take them, overthrow it, and destroy the world. But obviously, I think that it is just a really fun slash funny experience. It's definitely a mature experience. It's not for kids. Like if you've got kids, don't play it with them. I would say the same thing about Doom. It's not a kid's experience for sure, but it's also not like terribly offensive. It really can go either way. If you want to have that puristic, like I am totally destroying evil experience, you can have that. If you want to be evil, you can have that. And if you want to do stuff in between, you can also have that. It's very innovative in that there's so much choice available in a game that is actually really short. So you could probably beat the full thing in about 3 or 4 hours if you're just doing a basic run through.
Yeah.
It's not a big world, but it is a Metroidvania, so it's got a classic Metroidvania style map and system and upgrades. I'd say it's your movement system is definitely more uh, Belmont than Samus Aran, and I think that's why I really like it, because it's more akin to the Castlevania part of Metroidvania as opposed to the Metroid part, and
Yeah.
it's Metroid, or sorry, Castlevania 2 meets a more modern Metroidvania. And that's what I really like
Gotcha.
about it, because I like the visuals of Castlevania 2. Never really played the classic Castlevanias for very long. The most I've played is Super Castlevania 4 on the SNES Classic that I have, and I really like that game, and I need to play it through more. But it is a fun time to be had, and I'm enjoying it more than Moonlighter personally. But I do think that Moonlighter, if you if you don't try to play it like a Link to the Past, I think it's fine. But I'm used to stuff like a Link to the Past, which is why I would honestly, if given the choice for a roguelike in
Gotcha.
if I was given a choice of a roguelike in that sort of sphere, I would definitely pick something like Hades, like you mentioned, which is tremendous.
Hmm.
Or honestly, to do one even more like Link to the Past that I've recently been playing, a game called Rogue Legacy: The Ruins of either Tasos or Tassos. I really can't pronounce these things, but I'll just call it Rogue Legacy because that's basically its title. That is basically if Link to the Past had a class system,
Okay.
and it's a lot of fun. It is a whole lot of fun. But yeah, that sums up what I've been playing. What have you been playing?
So yeah, I bounce. So I bounce around a lot. Um,
I do too.
but one of the things that I've been playing recently, which is one of the games that I have logged the most hours into in any game. It's this one I've logged the second most hours. The first one being Terraria, but that second that I've been playing right now is Stardew Valley. And
Oh,
that's because
brilliant.
I am, yeah. So I'm playing that on stream, and it's a modded Stardew Valley where we're playing through Stardew Valley Expanded. So if anyone has played Stardew Valley and they enjoy it, and you're now I should preface you have to play on computer or mobile for mods. Um,
I didn't know mobile had mods. That's interesting.
yeah.
That's actually really cool.
So at least I should say at least Android mobile has access to mods. I don't know about iPhone.
Yeah, that
Um,
actually makes sense though.
but yeah, if you're playing on PC and you've played through the game before and you enjoy the game, but you've kind of gotten a little bored with it because it does get repetitive, I highly recommend downloading the mods for Stardew Valley Expanded, as it about doubles the base content.
Oh wow.
Yeah. It also makes a lot of characters that were previously like just NPCs, people that you can actually befriend, like Gunther at the museum. You can actually like get to know him. And I think he's one of the characters that is actually available to date
Oh,
for
interesting.
for characters. And then you also like Marlin up in the Adventurers Guild and all that. He's now one of the characters you can befriend. So there's little things like that where it's really cool, and then they've added a bunch of new characters as well to the world. Um, so absolutely enjoyable, and a lot of fun. So I'm almost through my first spring, so that will continue tomorrow when I stream and all that. But then besides that, I have been playing through Assassin's Creed Odyssey, um,
Hmm.
as well as in terms of, and it made me think of it as well. I haven't played it like in the past few weeks, but like one of the games that I keep going back to is a game called Let's Build a Zoo. Um,
Funny you
and when you
should
mentioned,
mention that because I actually got that on Game Pass just a couple weeks ago.
yeah, so when you mentioned morality, it made me think of that, and I absolutely love that game. Um, and that as well, you're presented with a lot of different things that come up where you have the choice of like, do you choose the right thing or like the good thing, or do you choose the bad thing? Um, like the
I
first time
actually
I didn't
didn't know that.
yeah, so I didn't realize that the first time I was playing through it, that how those things affect the gameplay. But basically, like there's a early on one of the things that's presented with is you find a it says you find a golden retriever, the owner's not around. Do you want to dress it up as a lion and present it to the zoo as like, here's our lion? And you can fully do that.
Oh gosh, that's
But
crazy.
you get negative morality points, which unlocks certain things in the what you call it, the like research tree essentially. So the more like good morality points that you get, you can unlock certain things in the research tree, and the more negative morality points you get, you can unlock different things in the research tree. And so it's just really interesting, like that side of it. Like, are you going to go the route that you're a zoo that is super environmentally friendly and you are like eco conscious and you're going to help with like the local town with like power and all of that? Or are you going to go the route of, as your animals get older, you chop them up and you sell them as meat?
It's funny because like I mentioned, I got it on Game Pass, and I haven't really spent too much time with it. But I've seen a couple of those things. I just didn't realize it actually goes that deep, and that's actually really cool because
Yeah.
to me, that's in the style of old school sort of tycoon game that I grew up
Yeah,
with,
yeah, yeah.
and I know
Exactly.
you grew up with as well. And those types of
Well,
games were just amazing.
yeah, and that's honestly that's why I picked up the game, because I was like, I'm like
Original Zoo
Zoo
Tycoon
Tycoon.
series was
Yeah,
tremendous.
Zoo Tycoon was one of those games that I spent hours and hours and hours playing, and this is essentially an 8-bit style Zoo Tycoon.
Yeah, and it definitely feels
Like
like that
that's
too.
now they um oh what is was it called Impossible Creatures? It's like if you took Zoo Tycoon, I think it was a game. I think it was called Impossible Creatures, but there was essentially like a battle strategy game where kind of like in the style of like StarCraft and like Age of Empires type thing, where you had your base and you were like going towards a goal and all that. Um, but what you did was you spliced animals together. It was an older game. And so it's like if you took that game, like that splicing of animals together, and added that to Zoo Tycoon, that's how that's what you'd get with Let's Build the Zoo, because you do actually also have your splicing machine where you can splice together different animals. So you
Wow,
can mix a goose and a rabbit. Like you can mix anything together and
that's
create a
awesome.
new creature from it. And that, like, the fun thing with that one is that doesn't affect your morality or like the that side of it at all. So you can just have fun with creating new creatures if you want to. Um, but yeah, the game is super, like, it has a base layer where you could just go through and you can create your
There's
zoo and
also
all that.
there's also
But
a dinosaur DLC,
yes,
and
yes, I haven't played it. I
I
do
haven't
own it.
gotten it yet. But the one thing I'm hoping for, and maybe you can elaborate on, because if it's in the base game, but the reason I'm excited about the prospect of a dinosaur mode in that is because there was a game that was released for the PC and PS2 that in middle school I played with a friend. It was called Jurassic Park Operation Genesis. And that game was
Mm,
basically a hybrid of, or basically it was Zoo Tycoon Jurassic Park Edition. And the funniest thing that we did in that game was we built enclosures of like velociraptors and T Rexes and all sorts of predators. And then we would dismantle the displays when people were there. And the dinosaurs would just run amok. And you could just watch them eat the guests alive one by one.
so I don't know if that is something you can do in the base game or not. Um, but yeah, it
Let's
that
now
might be something you can do, but I don't know. But yeah,
let's be honest. Let's be honest here. At the end of the day, when we were younger, the draw of those games was basically how many ways you could kill off your guests. I mean, that was
some of them for sure.
it was that twisted thing about being a middle schooler. Like I remember one of my fun memories was at the end of a school day at school. We had a row of computers, and we had a couple of the old Tycoon games. Particularly, we had one called Cruise Ship Tycoon, which was basically managing a cruise ship. And while we didn't try to genocide all of the passengers that were on board, surprisingly, the next best thing that we were able to do was in that game, we you could choose how many different types of rooms to have.
Yeah.
Like you could choose how many dining rooms, how many living rooms, how many bathrooms, how many store quarters, how many. So one of my friends got the brilliant idea: what if we take all of the bathrooms off the ship?
Oh no. Oh gosh.
And the funniest thing was the game actually had a reaction to that, and the each deck of the ship was just lemonade yellow.
Oh no.
It was gross, but it was also just the funniest thing. We just laughed so hard. I think we got in trouble because of how loud we were laughing, because it was just the funniest thing.
Yeah.
Oh, those games were tremendous back in the day, let me tell you. But yeah, Let's Build a Zoo. What a
Yes.
what a game
Yeah.
it
It's
is. Honestly, it just,
yeah.
for
That's
what little
definitely
I
a game.
played, what little I
I will.
played of it is just tremendous. But you've got more experience with it for sure.
Yeah, I will say, like, those sort of games, like, I love the semi sandbox type games like Terraria and Stardew Valley and those games. So whenever I come across a new indie game, like, I like that's one of those areas where I'm like, I need to not buy it because I have all these other games I need to play. But like, I don't know. There's just something so unique and fun about those games. And what I love is that usually it's such a small team that has created it, and you can tell, you can just see the love that was put into these games. Um, and so, like with that game, with like Let's Build a Zoo, or one of the other ones that I've been playing a bit of here and there is Potion Permit, which is like it's kind of got that Stardew Valley uh, feel, but it's in the area where you are an alchemist that has come to a town, and you are the person that is there to help all the townsfolk, just if they have any sort of ailments or things like that. You're essentially there to be a doctor, um, but you have to go and collect all your ingredients and all that stuff yourself. And so it's essentially like the mines in Stardew Valley, um, in that sense, where you go out into the wilderness and there's these like different creatures that are out there, and you have to fight them. Um, as you are trying to collect your different resources. And there's some of those resources that you need to fight them for, because your different creatures at times drop different resources. Um, I will say there's elements of the game that I'm like, man, I wish this was this way, or I wish it was that way. But it's a lot of fun as well. But yeah, with those sort of things, uh, I just love finding those sort of indie games and just giving
Right.
them a go.
Yeah, exactly. For me, it's indies all the way because they're so creative, they're so passionately done, and they're done by people who have a clear understanding of game design, how games should feel, how they work, and they're able to introduce elements that in games of a similar visual style in their era were not able to do. I
Yeah.
think Infernax, with the multiple choice endings, with some of the visuals and the cutscenes, it is truly, it's basically one of the best spiritual successors to Castlevania that I've played. Right up there with the Bloodstained Curse of the Moon games, which take heavily influence from Castlevania 3. Those are actually pretty good. I haven't bought them yet. I had one of them on gold, and I believe I beat the main boss in that. But I haven't played the second game at all, and I kind of want to get both of them on Switch because Infernax really kind of reignited my passion for playing Metroidvanias. The last
Yeah.
Metroidvania I'd played before that consistently was Hollow Knight, and I still haven't beaten it. It is a tremendous,
Oh, I
tremendous
love Hollow Knight.
Metroidvania. Yeah, it is. Anybody who's played it, I really don't even need to say how brilliant it is. I mean, just its visual style alone is uber uber good. But
But it's so difficult.
it is difficult, and the worst part about it is Team Cherry explicitly made it so that they want you to get lost in it, and I do. When I played Metroid Fusion as a kid, which was the first, I believe that was the first Metroidvania style game I had ever played, my biggest frustration was I would always get lost because I was too stupid to use the map, frankly. And I'm realizing
Yeah.
that as I'm making a Let's Play of Metroid Fusion. But in Hollow Knight, every time I try to go back and play it, it is always, where the heck am I? Where the heck do I need to go next? The game is giving me little to no direction.
Yep.
It's very frustrating to. I still haven't beaten it, and it is hard. Like you said, it is very hard. I am currently getting my butt kicked by one of the mid bosses. But Infernax is, that's another thing I forgot to mention about it is I don't know how they did it because I hadn't heard next to anything about this game. I had just seen that my game store had gotten a physical edition of it, and so I decided to get a digital version and just see what it was all about. And I had seen, because they do a parody of they do a parody of Castlevania where if you hit one of the walls you can get, you know how in Castlevania you can get like what they call wall chicken. I mean, technically, according to the user manual, it's a pork chop, but it's always been known as wall chicken. So they have a section of wall in the first castle that you go in, and you hit it like you would in Castlevania with your weapon, and it goes, and you have an option to press it and eat it. And then immediately goes to a cutscene of your character vomiting violently all over the ground. And he goes, in the text, he goes, ugh, wall chicken, what was I thinking? And the game has a cool effect to where when you hit an enemy and there's gore, like you're soaked in blood. And that's what I mean is this game does not shy away from the gore, just as a forewarning. And it puts a warning in the beginning about that. So
Yeah.
it eventually does soak away, and your save points are actually altars to pray at, like a winged statue, which I really do like the Crusaders motif. I think it fits well for a Castlevania type story fighting against like a really dark evil. Um,
Yeah.
but it is so funny that that same effect that they use for your character being soaked in blood, you're kind of like soaked in your puke after you do that, and that's just one Easter egg that you can only do once per like save. It is
Okay.
just, it is hilarious because the idea is that it's like, why on earth would you eat chicken you found in the wall? And it's even green too. Like the chicken is green, like whereas in Castlevania it just looks like a regular. It's just funny, but I agree with your sentiment about indie games is that they're so full of creativity, they're so full of just
Yeah.
good game design. And I think the quintessential game that set all of it off was really Shovel Knight, which is one of my favorites of all time because
Yeah. At least for the Castlevania ones.
yeah, for the Metroidvania style games,
Well, yeah,
Castlevania is
Metrovania.
definitely
Yeah.
it's definitely up there for sure. I mean, and it deviates from that a little bit. It's got some influences from games like DuckTales and Mega Man. So it's kind of a hybrid of Metroidvania and platformers in a way, but it showed that there's still life in these genres and in the visual styles
Yeah.
and even in the music. I mean the chip tunes. And that was another thing I was going to mention about Infernax is the chiptune music is comparable to Shovel Knight. It's that good. So
Okay.
it's definitely something I would recommend checking out, but I would caution my listeners that it has darker themes. There is a really, as much as there's a really good ending, there's also a really bad ending. So like if you're one of those people like, and I also say dark and gore, but there's also a lot of really like just like this is a tortured land imagery. Like you see zombified corpses on pikes and upside down crosses and in cages, and you see like gory, like, and this is all in 16-bit. You see like gory bodies strewn across the road. Like they want you to understand that this is a land that has been just utterly devastated by evil, and you're there to
Yeah.
either fight it or join it. So I mean, just keeping that in mind for certain listeners, but I do think it is a good game, and I'm on my third playthrough with a secret weapon that I unlocked. So there's a whole bunch of secret weapons and cheats and different things that you can unlock based on names. There's also a cheat room which also has a bunch of the I guess it was a Kickstarter game, so you see all the Kickstarter backers. It just really good, really awesome title. But that and Moonlighter are mine. And then as far as just regular stuff I've been playing, I've been trying to get into Animal Crossing. I've been playing with a friend, and me and her go back and trade stuff and just kind of do small things on each other's islands just for fun. Um, and then Splatoon 3, which came out, I've been playing that. That just got a major update, and I haven't played through it. I tested some of the weapons, that's as far as I got there, but I haven't played any actual matches with them. Um, I bought Final Fantasy from the Pixel remaster on PC. It's been a lot of fun, but
Nice.
I'm still waiting for them to release that on Switch potentially because it deserves to be. I don't know what Square Enix is doing, not releasing those games on console. Um, but I decided to, bite the bullet and get it on PC just to see how well it plays, and it does play extraordinarily well. The soundtrack is great. The gameplay is what you'd expect. It's classic Final Fantasy. I definitely want to get the others, but I'm just waiting to see if Square decides to put it on console because I feel like it really needs to be. Because I would rather play it on Switch than on my PC if I have the choice. But I
I
I'm like
feel
I'm like you. I'm bouncing back and forth in between a whole bunch of games.
I feel like the one other game that I've been playing, and about a week and a half ago, I sank way too much time into. This is gonna make you groan Ursai. Um, start playing Genshin Impact.
I'll be honest. I would probably groan or sigh, but I just don't know anything about the game. Like I don't know enough to have an opinion one way or the other. I know it's advertised to death, and
Oh
it's
yeah.
one of those. I think it might be an advertisement game. Like it's mobile. It's mobile
Well, it's
title
a
and
gotcha game.
yeah, that's the word I'm like. Thank you, thank you. It's a gotcha game.
It it and so like it has its elements where you like they definitely design characters and design things to like goad people into spending money, but you do not have to spend money to like uh you don't even have to spend money to be able to do like some of the pulls and things like that because you can earn them in game as well. Um and in all honesty, the after playing it now, granted, I've started playing Genshin Impact much later than anyone else. Um but it's very much a game where I'm like, as I'm playing, I'm like, man, this is what to some extent I'm like, this is what I wish Breath of the Wild would have been more of.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's fair. It's one of those. Um, it looks like one of those things that has really solid gameplay. And honestly, I'm glad you brought
Absolutely.
up Breath of the Wild because, not to go off on too much of a tangent, but I often let people know that I was honestly not a big fan of Breath of the Wild.
I enjoyed general gameplay. The ending, the way that game ended, annoyed the crap out of me because uh it's one of those things where you fight all the divine beasts and you're like, oh, these can be semi challenging. And so you're like, oh, these are semi challenging. I bet Ganon's gonna be like even harder. And then he felt like the easiest one out of them all.
see. I couldn't even make it to the first Divine Beast. I That game felt like the bane of my existence because that came out when the Switch very first launched, and it was the only game I had, and so I played it like crazy, just trying to get as much out of it as possible. But it became very clear to me that this game was more of an open world survival game than an open world Zelda game, and I could not get past the weapon durability. I could not get past the stamina limitations, and I could not get past because of the weapon durability. It also disincentivized combat for me. I didn't like fighting things, and so
Yeah,
you
that's
combine
true. That's
if
very
you
true.
combine all of these elements. And a friend of mine pointed out, another member of Bad Gamepad, Flammable or Flemmy. He pointed out to me, and he's a big Zelda fan. One of the reasons he stopped playing it initially was because he just kept dying. Because you end up getting into so much territory at certain points in the game where you're not prepared to deal with the strength of certain enemies. And
Yeah.
even if you've got decent weapons, it's a game that's incredibly punishing for doing the very thing it wants you to do, which is to explore. And I just, as a traditional Zelda fan, I tried my hardest to get into it and to revisit it. I even revisited it years later, and I just couldn't. And
Yeah.
it was one of those things where it's like, yeah, I think it's a beautiful game. I love the concept of an open world Zelda, but it just didn't feel like Zelda. It felt way too different. They did too much different at once. And I know people praise all of the differences and they were trying to say, "Oh, Zelda got stale." I disagree. One of my favorite Zeldas of all time is A Link Between Worlds on the 3DS because it takes
Oh,
classic
absolutely.
2D Zelda and it changes it enough to where it feels like a natural progression of the series, and it, like for instance, it ties most
Yeah.
of your consumable items to a rechargeable meter as well as your magic. So it consolidates resources and it streamlines the game in a way. but it still feels like a classic Link to the Past type experience. It's visually good, and it's got a compelling story that gets actually pretty emotional at the end, and
Yeah.
it has a really nice twist, which I won't spoil for anybody who hasn't played it, but um, it's gone down as my favorite, at least 2D Zelda of all time, even more so than the original Link to the Past, and I hope it gets
Yeah.
a Switch port at some point. But Breath of the Wild, it just the most fun I had in that game was hunting and cooking. I mean, those were the two
So
elements to it that I really enjoyed.
what you mentioned, it made me realize something, and I think this is what Genshin Impact did really well. First of all, weapons don't have durability. You once you have a weapon, you have a weapon, and
Oh, okay.
You can further upgrade that weapon, like, and make it even stronger. Um, because it's Genshin Impact is in a way still also a JRPG.
Yeah, that's what it
Um,
looked like to me. That's all I really knew about it.
and because you level up your characters and things like that. So I guess in a way it would be like if you took like Final Fantasy Online and mixed it with Breath of the Wild in a way. You
Okay.
might end up with that, but one of the things is like with so you also have cooking in the game as well. But what I really like is that you get recipes, and you have and it tells you how many times you have to cook the recipe before you master it. And
Yeah,
so
that's
when
something
you
you have to unlock with Breath of the well, no, not even unlock. You have to experiment with in Breath of the Wild. Like
yeah,
there's
so
no recipe system whatsoever in that game. Like you have to go straight to a
no.
wiki and find this ingredient and this ingredient make this.
Yeah. So in this, you can't just mix random ingredients, but what it does is it has this like your little mini game where it says when you get a recipe, like for example, something that boosts your health. It says your this dish will boost your health from this range to this range. And then it has a little like mini game where it has like this like kind of like slider that goes up and down, and it has a little section where if you get it right in the middle, it's perfect, and it has like a little yellow like block there, and on the sides it has oranges, and then on those sides it's good.
Oh,
And
okay.
so depending on where you hit it, you get a better quality like end product.
Oh,
And
okay.
then the more then like depending on the dish, you have to cook it 5 times, or some of them are 10 and some of them are 20, but you have to cook it a certain amount of times before you perfect the recipe. And once you perfect the recipe, you no longer have to play that mini game. You just choose how many you want to cook, and it cooks it for you automatically. You do initially have to do that like mini game, all the different recipes as you make them and as you get better at them. So that is an element that I really like, because you still have to go collect all the ingredients, you have to do all that stuff, but you do you do have those things where you have to do the little mini game, but you also get to a point where you don't have to do it for everything, because I know like for certain things that can become kind of a bit of a slog when you're going, I have to cook like 15 of these things
Right.
for stuff, and now I'm sitting here for the next 10 minutes because I have to keep cooking this one thing over and over and over. Whereas
Yeah.
once you master the recipe, you just say, I want these, and it cooks it instantaneously for you.
Yeah, my
Um,
my thing with Breath of the Wild was you needed to cook certain foods to be able to adjust to extreme temperature. So you had to like stock up on a whole bunch of like spicy kebabs to be able to go into one of the cold areas, for instance, and stuff like that. And that was really annoying because they took up inventory space, and inventory space in that game was so valuable, but yet so much stuff took it up, and it just was. I think that game was wildly overpraised. It did so much that was just extraordinarily frustrating to have to manage over time. Excuse me. You'll have to bear with me, folks. I've been having this weird sort of respiratory thing, so if my voice sounds deep or slower, it's because I've got this sort of like thing in my chest going on that I'm not quite sure, and it acts up weirdly. But anyways, yeah. With overall, Breath of the Wild to me is just, and I don't mean to harp on it for too long, but it's not a terrible game, but it's a game with decisions that I don't particularly agree with and that don't make me want to go back to it. And I'm not excited for Tears of the Kingdom if it's going to be more of the same. If they correct the what I consider to be issues with Breath of the Wild, then I will gladly go back to it and give it another shake. But if it's going to be more of the same, if it's just going to be a copy paste, which has a very good chance of being based on what I know of Tears of the Kingdom,
Yeah.
then I'm not interested in spending $60 on it. It's just not going to be the type of Zelda experience I want. I'll wait till they either remake or make another 2D entry. But I figure I can move on to the next topic if you're all set with games you play. The trailers for the Super Mario Brothers movie have been releasing over the past couple of weeks, and there's been a lot of talk about the different elements of it, and I thought that we could each share our thoughts. Now, when I saw the initial trailer, my thoughts were, I love how this thing looks. This looks exactly like it's supposed to. Now, granted, there were some illumination-y changes to small elements of things like character costumes, but as an overall, it looks like a Mario world. Bowser looks like Bowser. Mario looks like Mario. All of the characters look like they're supposed to. The big controversy has come with the voice acting. And I think that that's something where we could get into a lot of discussion about. Here's my thing. The most of the people were actually the one people were the most worried about was Jack Black as Bowser. That didn't bother me, and I will say this: people say that it's tremendous and that I can't believe it's Jack Black. No, it's Jack Black.
Oh, you can tell it's Jack Black,
but that fits. He does it very well, and that doesn't bother me. Now, Chris Pratt.
Let's be honest though. Bowser in general does not have a consistent voice that we hear besides in games for the most part.
Yeah.
So it leaves a lot up to interpretation, and that's the difference between Bowser and Mario and Jack Black and Chris Pratt for this.
Yeah, with Bowser, the only consistent voice that we've heard so far has been Super Mario Sunshine, and that was, I liked it, but it was mostly panned by people, that voice performance, which is why Nintendo really hasn't had him voice him since. But I think what Jack Black has done definitely works. Now, the really controversial one is Chris Pratt as Mario, and my thoughts on that are, it is not offensively bad, and the one element that people had that that bothered people that I actually thought was perfect was that he's doing a Brooklyn accent. I think him doing a Brooklyn accent is fine. The biggest problem is I don't think he's very good at it.
Yeah.
I am perfectly okay with him having a Brooklyn accent because I know Mario history, and I know that in the original Super Mario Bros. Super Show, that's what he had. And in the original live-action movie that we all try not to talk about, that is also what he had. That element does not bother me. It doesn't bother me that it's not just a carbon copy of Charles Martinet. Although, interestingly enough, the French dub has somebody trying to emulate Charles Martinet. So that's interesting. But
it's going to be really interesting to see what the Japanese dub does.
It is. But I will say, I am okay with the element of it being a Brooklyn accent. My problem is, and even with more footage I'm seeing, it doesn't seem like Chris Pratt is consistently in that accent. It feels like he breaks from it. Not intentionally, but he just sounds like Chris Pratt. And then
Yeah.
as more trailers have come out, like I will praise the other three good performances that I thought. Keegan Michael Key as Toad, which was another very controversial one because people were like, "Wait, what?" But for the characterization that they're doing with Toad, it is perfect. Again, it is one of those things where the way that they're choosing to do it makes sense.
Yeah.
The voice of Kamek, I can't remember what his name is. Again, also great. The voice of Luigi, Charlie Day, fantastic. I would say better than Mario,
Oh
from
yeah.
what I've heard. I don't know what your feelings are in particular, but
Yeah. Overall, I would say all the different voices I've heard, I've actually really enjoyed. But again, I think the problem with Mario is even when, uh, just because of the fact that like, yeah, we've had these TV shows and the movies and such in the past, but the fact of the matter is, this movie is not based off of those. It's based off of the games, and
right.
it's not the sound that we're used to or that everyone has really come to know and love, specifically from Mario from those games. I think there's a lot of wiggle room with other characters because of the fact that they are more side characters. Um, and I
One
think,
I will disagree with though. One other character I'm not a huge fan of is honestly Peach. It's
yeah,
just Anya Taylor Joy with a more English accent because I know she's accented. I wasn't a big
yeah,
fan of that because that was the same problem I have with Chris Pratt. So it's the same complaint there. Don't think she'll be a bad character, although
yeah,
I've got some reservations on how they're going to portray her. I'm not totally convinced that. I'm a little bit worried about Mary Sue territory with her, but I think
yeah.
part of that has to do with they're doing Mario as a fish out of water, which we'll talk about that in a minute. Um, but
But
yeah, no, I
yeah,
totally agree with you in that sense because it's based on the games. There's sort of a
yeah,
stigma about changing it, even though it's familiar to people like me who understand that Mario has had voices that were more Brooklyn esque, and that's basically more or less what he was based on. But
yeah,
I keep saying Charles Martinet. I think it's like Martinet I don't know what it is. It's Charles. I'm just gonna call him Charles because that's his first name. He has ever since he first voiced Mario, he has set the standard that we have all come to know and love. He's iconic. And because it has been so long since we've seen a deviation from that, it is very jarring and people are understandably upset. And he makes a cameo as some character in that movie, which is also a little bit kind of frustrating because it's like why didn't you just have him do. And I understand another people were pointing out that it's not an easy voice for him to do, like it's a vocally straining voice, and I understand that, especially for talking for long periods of time. People
yeah.
have said that when they were at conventions and things and he was doing the voice, that it was very hard for him to keep it up consistently because we also got to remember Mario is not very much a speaking character in the games. He has specific lines and then
No.
that's that.
So again, I would say overall, the thing that I have a problem with Chris Pratt is, again, I think the thing is those specific sounds,
Right.
and like kind of emulating a bit of a tone that and cadence that lends to when he uses, uh like when he goes towards those things. Like, you have excellent like areas where they could have really quickly sold people on it. um like, for example, the first trailer that they released, when Mario shows up and they're heading to the Mushroom Kingdom,
Yeah.
it should have been a "let's go."
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree.
Like
And so he's like,
that,
Mushroom Kingdom, here we come. It's like
yeah,
that felt like it felt like such a mixed thing because again it felt like he was phasing in and out of that Brooklyn-esque accent, and
Yeah.
he just doesn't, and not to knock on Chris Pratt because I love Chris Pratt, I really do, but
Now,
he's not
here's
good at
something.
it. He's just
Here
not good at it.
here's something, and this is where I want to hold out. I want to give the benefit of the doubt. And if they did this, I think this would be really cool, but I don't think this is going to be the case,
Yeah.
which is I I don't remember who I was talking to or where I read, if I read it somewhere, if I was talking to someone, but the idea that uh, we eventually get to a point where he sounds like Mario. When he first shows up, he doesn't. But by the end of the movie, he sounds like Mario. Like if
Interesting.
there was that gradual progression, like the longer he's in the Mushroom Kingdom, he sounds more like Mario. We get to a point where he sounds like Mario we know. I think that could be really cool and really interesting. Do I think they're going to go down that route? No.
Oh, I don't think so at all. I think they're going to stick with the Brooklyn thing because it's been done before, and because I think that based on what I'm seeing on the themes of this movie, it seems to be, as much as it's based on the games, it seems to be lifting elements from what small examples of prior Mario we had, like the Super Mario Brothers Super Show and the other Mario movie, but they're just trying to ground it more in being based on the games because those were sort of their own thing, but they're
Uh,
lifting the influences that they feel work from those prior pieces of media, just because it's probably easier. Like I saw one of the posters of like Mario and Luigi in the quote unquote real world, and they had their plumbing
uh,
tools and they had their plumbing van, and it was everything looked kind of just
I
like.
will I will say with that one, what I really appreciated, and I don't know if you saw and caught this, in the back of that poster is Pauline.
Yes, I did see that. Another feature was on their van. It said Mario Brothers Plumbing. It was in the font of New Super Mario Brothers. I thought that was really neat, and it had
Yeah.
like Mario, like instruction booklet art Mario and Luigi on it, which I thought was. I swear, if they print that into a T-shirt, I'm buying that day one. But I'm such a
Yeah, so
sucker
I
for
think
Mario merchandise. Those elements are really
I
good. Now, I one thing I wanted to ask you about, and I
uh-huh.
was curious how you were thinking because I've got more frustrated and worried reservations about this. Mario and Luigi makes sort of sense because of his character being kind of cowardly and just kind of feeble, but yet he rises to the occasion. Mario being such a clumsy fish out of water, the way that they're having him, and just kind of a bumbling klutz for what appears to be the first half of the movie, what it's going to be. I don't know how long he's going to be like this, but to me, that particular element reeks of Illumination. That does not feel like a Nintendo
Yeah.
decision. That
No.
really bothers me. And the reason it bothers me is not because I don't like a fish out of water story. I think that's fine. But it's because Mario is such a competent hero in the games and he can
Yeah.
overcome such tremendous odds. It seems like what they're doing is they're making him a fish out of water for the Illumination sort of slapstick comedic haha, look at this is so funny. I just don't like seeing a hero I grew up with being disrespected in such a way.
Well,
I'm okay
yeah.
with having him be somewhat incompetent and unsure of himself, but I don't
Yeah,
like the
what I'm
idea of
really
like the last 30 minutes of the movie him finally becoming Super Mario as it were. And I also don't like the idea of Peach being his Yoda, which also seems to be something that they're playing into. I don't know if that's really going to be the
yeah.
case, but I don't like the potential of that because I really
Yeah,
I
you
feel
very
it.
again, you get what we were talking about before we started, but there are very much elements of the woke culture
Right.
with this, and you see that in the sense of like what you're talking about, where um, Mario, and I feel like I'm going to be stepping on some toes with what I'm about to say, but whatever. Mario is a white male, and so he's being portrayed as kind of the bumbling idiot, whereas with like Peach and all that, you have your female character who's competent, who is the I don't need no man, queen and all that,
Right.
princess, whatever you want to call her,
Right.
and
That's a
and
big concern that people have, and I think the problem is
well,
people's response to that is usually like, well, Peach is playable in the games and she's fairly competent. And I say, well, okay, that's fine. She can be competent. I'm not saying that she has to even necessarily be a damsel in distress. I'm
yeah,
okay if she's not, because again, she is playable in the games. She has her own game where she rescues Mario and Luigi. I'm okay with all that. What I'm not okay with is if Mario and Luigi are being set up to be the saviors of this world, then what is the point in making Peach initially stronger than they are and having to be the one to show them how to be the heroes? It
well,
just doesn't
also
make sense.
no, be we never see Mario doing like a traditional Mario type thing where you're like, oh, that's really cool. I like the one thing that they could have done, and everyone would have freaked out about it. They gave to Peach instead, which was the flame fire,
Yeah, the
the flame,
fire
the
flower.
fire flower. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's like she's
and
and even in that scene, it's almost like she's showing him how it works. Like she's like, this is how this world works, and then they show him doing the obstacle course, fumbling around. Then they cut to her, and she's sort of face palming as he's like fumbling his way through. The way it's set up is like they're making her the uber strong one that has to sort of slowly guide him to being into that hero, and I just don't
so
feel like that works.
here's my predictions for this movie then for how it's going to play out.
Okay.
So, um, from what I've gathered, Mario's going to enter the world because Luigi's been kidnapped.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Uh, Luigi's been kidnapped by Bowser. He's the one being kidnapped. Um, Peach has to, but Bowser's also the. There's going to be some prophecy or something like that, where it's like this is the one who's going to save us, and it's this thing of like, how is he going to save us because he's super incompetent and look he's not able to do anything, um, and it's going to be this thing uh, where the person telling them is going to be some wise person. It's not going to be Peach. Peach is going to be the person who is reluctantly teaching Mario how to do it because she views him as incompetent as well. But it's going to get to a point in the movie where all of a sudden there's like the light switch moment where things click for Mario, and he's going to go, oh, this is how I do it. And all of a sudden he's going to like massive level up sort of thing. And all of
Right.
a sudden, like out of nowhere, compared to what we've seen prior, he's going to be able to do all this stuff. And it's going to be like this thing where, again, uh, the the fanboys who don't care that are just there to see the like, as my friend calls it, the Rasengan on the moon, which is because of how every time Naruto does the Rasengan, like the fanboys freak out, sort of thing. Um, it's that same sort of thing where they're going to do that thing where he gets his power or whatever, and he goes to fight Bowser, and there's going to be that thing, and uh, all the fanboys are going to be like, "Oh, it was the most amazing thing," and it's going to be like, yeah, it was really cool, but it doesn't. It's not going to make a whole lot of like story sense of like how they got to the point where they were able to do that.
Right.
And I personally think that's kind of the direction it's things are going to end up going because of just what they've been showing and what they've been doing.
Well,
And I
can I
think,
offer a counter to that? I
yeah,
think some of that is what they very well could do, but I'm going to offer something a little bit different based on the intro. I think what's going to happen is I agree that Luigi is probably going to be kidnapped, but I think the ultimate thing that they're setting up is that Bowser is looking for the Power Stars. The Power Stars are in each world, and they're the key to some sort of ultimate power, sort of kind of akin to Mario
uh,
64. And what they'll
okay,
do is He's invading kingdoms and he's taking their power stars and then destroying everything in his wake. And so they have to stop him, but like they sort of hinted at in the trailers, like, oh, well, we're toads, we can't do anything. Or you look at the penguins, they just threw snowballs at him, and he's, like, so he's trying to gather these power stars. Luigi somehow gets kidnapped. Either he falls down a pipe or whatever. Somehow he ends up getting captured, and Mario's just trying to get him. Or him and Mario. I think him and Mario actually probably fall down a similar pipe and get separated. And Mario ends up in the Mushroom Kingdom. Luigi ends up with Bowser somehow, or getting captured by Bowser. And Peach is going to try to lead a resistance against Bowser, because he's been an ongoing threat. Different. I think they even said galaxies, because they're doing like a Mario Galaxy thing. Like each galaxy has fallen. But there could be a prophecy about a chosen one, maybe like a dude in a red hat and his brother, or some way they'll work it into where Mario is like a chosen one. But it'll be like, oh, well, we have to put him to the test, and it turns out, oh no, he's just this bumbling idiot, and what hope do we have? But then Peach is coming along, and she's gonna just like encourage him. She might not even really be his Yoda, but she'll try to encourage him to be the best that he can be, and she'll give sort of examples of how he can do that. Which would be a little bit less offensive than the way that I think that some people are thinking she's going to be. But it still worries me because, like you said, it's 2022. There's that potential woke factor. I mean, ultimately, I don't think Illumination really engages in it that much, but it's 2022 Hollywood, so it just wouldn't surprise me.
When I say that stuff, like that woke side of it, I should put it this way. I don't think Illumination is going to like deliberately do it, but the problem is the fact that it has become such a part of culture.
Exactly.
That they're going to implement these things, or they're going to do things like that without even thinking about it.
Exactly.
I mean, it's like The Simpsons or Family Guy or any of these things where the male character is your bumbling idiot,
right,
and the female is one who has to be the person who's like, this is how it's done, and has to kind of handhold a bit.
Yeah, like reverse mansplaining, as it were. That sort of thing. I absolutely get what you're saying.
So I don't think it's like something where they're gonna like, it is Illumination. I don't think they're necessarily gonna be like, oh, we're going to like put all this stuff in it because we need to appease the different people. No, I don't think that's necessarily what's going to happen, but I do think like it is going to be something where the normal roles that we see Peach and Mario in like the games, we're not necessarily going to see them in this. Is it going to be a fun movie though? Oh yeah, I absolutely think it's going to be a very fun
100%. I think already some of the comedic beats I'm really happy with, which, to be fair, Illumination I think has been very consistently good on those in quite a few of their movies. Not all of them. Some of their movies kind of fell flat, but in a lot of them they definitely hit at certain points. Like, they're really good at the slapstick and some of the comedic timing. Again, Keegan-Michael Key as Toad I think is going to absolutely kill it. Some of his lines, like they showed a preview at the Game Awards, some of his lines are just tremendous. They're very well executed, and I think it's going to be really funny. I just don't like the idea of Mario being the butt of the joke for half of the movie, because even let's give the benefit of the doubt and say that they're not doing that just to sort of emasculate him, but they're really leaning heavy into the fish out of water thing. I just am not crazy about that concept, because the games don't really imply that Mario isn't from that world to begin with. If anything, the games tend to imply that he actually is a resident of the Mushroom Kingdom. And it'll be interesting to see if that's how the movie ends, if him and Luigi end up like building a house there and plumbing there, but ultimately, like, this is just our speculation, so I just wanted to preface for people like this. We don't know how this is going to play out. This is just fun speculation. We're not dogpiling it. We're not even saying it's going to be bad in particular, but there are things that, as fans of this particular franchise, we're concerned that they could very easily have moments that'll just kind of take the fun out of it, because ultimately the goal of this movie is to be fun, because it's going to be
Yeah.
fun for all ages. It's going to make you feel like you're watching a movie with characters that you're very familiar with. But I want
And
to
I will
see.
say the slapstick side of it that we're talking about, the fun for all ages, I think that's one of the reasons why, unfortunately, we're going to see that with Mario,
Yeah,
is because, like, so when the last trailer came out, like, oh, this past week or so, was it? No, 2 weeks ago,
yeah. And then
almost.
the game
Um,
awards clip, I think, was as little as yesterday or the day before.
okay. So I haven't seen that one yet, but the full length trailer one, we had a bunch of people over here for dinner and all that, and it came out. So I sat down and I was like, "Oh, let me check this out." And my friend's son, who's 7, just like it's like, "Oh, what's he watching?" And then my other friend's son, who's just 2, is like, "Oh, a screen." So they were on either side of me, um, and they watched it with me, and my friend's son Cal, who's 7, afterwards, uh, um was like, "Oh, you know what my favorite part of the trailer was? It was with the fish sucking on his face." And he's like, "It was so funny." So like for him as a 7-year-old, he thought that was he loved that part. He thought that was
Right.
hilarious. So I have to like those sort of things
Yeah, that's what's
like
that's the core of where Illumination's like, listen, we got to do this sort of thing, otherwise the kids are going to lose
yeah.
interest. And that I've got, you got to do certain things for the kids. I'm absolutely all for that. My
Yeah.
problem is that one of the biggest complaints against Illumination is that they go overboard with that stuff.
Yeah.
Like they
Well,
really
and
do, because they underestimate what kids are able to process in terms of humor. Like that's easy stuff to do, but it gets to the point where it just gets, if you do it too much, it just gets obnoxious, because it's like, okay, well, you've got other audiences here too. Like Mario is a all ages franchise, and that's
yeah.
why I'm glad that Nintendo is somewhat supervising this, although I don't know. Here's what worries me about that. You've got Shigeru Miyamoto
Mhm.
supervising it, who is the creator of Mario. He's got world renown. He's got this reputation amongst Nintendo fans as being just sort of awesome. Although there's a lot of stuff I feel like people really don't get about Miyamoto. I don't think he's quite the person that people think he is. Not saying he's bad or anything, but I think that sometimes people misattribute sort of what he's responsible for and how he treats franchises. That's a whole nother discussion. But what concerns me is I don't feel, because Nintendo really hasn't worked with Hollywood very much, I don't feel like they know how to push back and say no to as much. And I could be wrong. They could have said no to a whole bunch of Illumination's idea. I'm sure they have. I think that's just a part of the brainstorming process. But I don't think they know how to say no to certain elements of a film that specific audiences just don't care for. Like
Well, again,
I
so
really,
you mentioned the aspect of it being a for all ages thing.
yeah,
And then you're thinking about Japan, where I don't think Japan looks at it as a for all ages thing.
yeah,
I think that they look at it and go, "This is for your kids between the ages of 7 to 12.
right,
If others want to watch it, that's great, but they're not the audience. This is the audience." And I say that because it's the same thing with um, Doraemon or like Lupin the Third and things like that. Like these are franchises that are targeted at a younger audience, but they have your adult fan base and such as well. But they don't cater to that at all. And so I think, and this is where I'm worried, that they might go, okay, because it's Japan, they'll treat Mario a bit like they're willing to treat Mario a bit like Lupin, or like I forget the main character from Doraemon and all that, like the boy. But you have these characters who they do these cool things, but they're very much like at times the bumbling idiot.
Yeah, yeah, and
Um,
that could very much play into it. If Japan is viewing it as more of an adolescent thing, then Nintendo could definitely be pushing that. But I honestly think that a majority of that is just Illumination's own uh, sort of formula because of things like
no, I agree.
Minions, especially
I
Minions.
I
Um,
agree with that, but what I'm saying it would more of what I meant is I don't. I'm saying I don't think they're pushing back on this stuff
right,
because they probably view it, and especially with
right. I see what you're
again,
saying.
like you're saying, Miyamoto, like he loves Mario. He's like active in Mario stuff, but he's Japanese. He's not American. He does not have an American mindset when it comes to stuff, and so because of that, what an American would expect or view is going to be very different from what Miyamoto expects or views because he is coming from that Japanese mindset.
Right, and he's got a very much so like ultimately he is more for a family friendly sort of thing overall with his games. Not all of them, of course, but with most of them, he wants general audiences to be able to experience games and to experience Mario, things like that. So he
Yeah.
wouldn't push back against that. Another thing that he and Nintendo at large would push back against is having major name brand recognition people for star power. I really don't think that that's necessary for Mario in order to have talent. Like I think they if they could find somebody with talent, then they wouldn't need Chris Pratt, Anya Taylor Joy, Jack Black, Keegan Michael Key. And I'm
And
not
I
saying
think
it's necessarily a problem that they have these, but I really think the only reason they do is because they
because of what they're associated with.
exactly. And I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you're more you've got more of an understanding of the Japanese mindset with this. But I think they seem to believe that, in America at least, that it's the stars that really sell the movies, whereas in the 21st century, that's not the case really anymore. It's more so the performance given and the story, and the actors are just kind of an afterthought. Like the actors, like we're willing to have discussions to say like, oh, we think this actor would be good in this role and that and the other, but it's not the actors themselves. It's not just attaching a name to a product that sells it. But that's an old school mentality that that many studios and certain cultures even will still have. If you know what I'm
So
saying.
I think Japan does have a lot of that sort of mindset when it comes to stuff, and that you can really see that evident with the fact that what you can call it, specifically anime, with like the openings.
Yeah.
Um, and now, granted, with how large of an industry anime is, what they do with the openings makes sense, but they get major bands and artists to create songs that they use for the opening. And now what that does is that brings in the people who like that artist to watch the show as well. Or vice versa. The people who like the show like the song, so then they go check out the artist and start following the stuff that they do. Whereas, like in the United States and all of that, with a lot of your animation things like that, like for example, Adventure Time, for let's say, no one's listening to the Adventure Time theme going, man, I really like the Adventure Time theme. I want to go check out like the artist behind this or things like that. I think the last time I can really think where like there was an intro like that. Now I think they used to do some of that in the states,
Yeah,
and that gets
no,
into
they
more.
definitely used to. Like the intro for Shrek, for instance, was Smash Mouth.
Yeah,
Um,
or what I think, what I guess I mean like TV shows. Like
yeah,
what I think of is like Teen Titans.
yeah. Oh
How
yeah,
that
yeah.
was
That
just really good, and everyone was like, "Oh, that's so good." And then you would look them up, and it's like it's Puffy Amiyumi,
yeah,
and you're like, "Oh, this is like," and then you start listening to their stuff, and so at least like for some of those early things, there is enough of like that side of it where I would go and like earlier things check it out, but now it's not that way. Whereas Japan is still very much that way, where they're like, oh, these people are big, let's use them, and it doesn't always make sense. But I do think that when it comes to animation and all of that from major studios, unfortunately, there it like even in the states
Yes.
there is still that mindset of like, oh, we need to get the A-list actors. We shouldn't just go with voice actors because no one knows who these voices are.
Yes, exactly.
And
And it's
it's
actually,
like,
believe it or not,
what?
it's a real problem because they end up taking roles that are iconic, like the voice of Mario, for instance, which is a perfect example, and they end up replacing them. And then you've got the fans of that established character going, "What the fudge?" You know,
Yeah.
like what was wrong with the other voice actor? But it's this idea that you need star power in order to sell a movie, and that is just I just see what I did. Wow, I walked right into that one. We are staying in theme with Mario here, folks. But yeah, you need that. The fact that you need that sort of that A list.
They really works for Jack Black then with Bowser because you need the star power.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's just another example of it's not even just Japan. Like you said, it is very much still America, and Illumination is basically a part of Universal. So I guarantee you, their one of their stipulations is, oh well, we have to have some big names here and some up and coming people like Anya Taylor Joy's being. I think she's honestly being astroturfed as an actress. I'm not saying she's bad, but they're putting her in a lot of stuff, and she's kind of on the
Yeah.
up and up. She's kind of in the position where somebody like uh, Jennifer Lawrence was a few years ago, which her star power kind of faded. Although she was in the news recently for a really dumb comment, but honestly, it's this mentality, especially for the Mario Brothers movie, I think is definitely the response to this is what is showing that mentality doesn't work anymore. Because when people see Chris Pratt as
Yeah.
Mario, they go, "That's not Mario. I don't conceivably see how he can perform as
And
Mario."
it's unfortunate because of the stuff that uh happened with Sonic, where they're like, if we get enough people, they're gonna recast. And it's like, no, you actually had uh, a company that really you ended up having like people that were part of the production that actually and character design for the Sonic movie that really cared what um, the like fans thought.
Oh,
And
like the when the original trailer dropped with the
yeah,
just the terrible design.
so uh it's really interesting when you like because listened to an interview with the person like the guy who's the director for that movie and all that, where he was like, yeah, he's like, when that happened, like he was talking about the person that they had hired and all that for like the character design. And he's like, I had contacted him to see if he had seen like the backlash that was going on. He's like, oh yeah. He's like, oh, I already redesigned Sonic, and we're gonna start using the other one now. And he's like, and so it was one of those things where they had initially they were going to use that other one, and it was because after a while people were like, oh, it's just a publicity stunt. It actually wasn't, and so
No, that was totally what they were going to do because they felt like they could get away with enough flexibility to where people wouldn't really mind it, but they severely, I mean, if there's any fan base that you do not fudge with, it is the Sonic fan base. I mean, you do not mess with those guys. I mean, I'm a Sonic fan, but the Sonic fandom is
yeah,
notoriously vicious. I mean, it is you wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole, and they came out in force and were like, this is not okay. And props to them
yeah,
for doing what they did because that was awesome. Now, in the case of the Mario movie, with the controversy with Mario's voice, it's not one of those things where they have the ability to just go in and change it like they did with the
Yeah,
animation for Sonic. But
exactly.
on the plus side, they've gotten the visuals right from day one.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
that I
I
can
will
only
say, like,
attribute to Nintendo, because I guarantee you, if Nintendo wasn't as involved as they were, I guarantee you there would be somebody at Illumination going, "What if we made this look like this?" And it would be
yeah.
something that just wouldn't make any sense.
What if you had a really elongated toad?
Yeah, or
Yeah, you'd be looking at it like,
what
what
if
the
you put
crap?
lipstick on the female toads, or what if you made Yoshi have a tiny nose, or like just these small things to make it look more
Yeah,
Illumination-esque. And as far as I can tell, Nintendo has firmly put their foot down, and we are all the better for it because we get that beautiful
yeah.
Mario iconography. Like you have to watch that short Mushroom Kingdom clip, because it's stuff that a lot of stuff that you've seen, but it just shows how the iconography is just there, and it pops, and it's eye grab. It's gorgeous, and I can only attribute that to Nintendo being like, if you're gonna do this, you're gonna make it look the way we say it's supposed to look, or at least as close to how we say it's gonna look as possible, or you're not gonna do it. And it's all the better for it. Now, ultimately, we don't know how this movie's going to turn out. I mean,
Yeah.
we're basing all of this discussion on at least two trailers and one clip, and the
Yeah,
movie comes out.
we're basing this off of roughly 4 minutes of uh visuals that we've seen.
And I will join in the people who are echoing the praise that it looks like it's supposed to, and it looks great. And I think that that is
Oh,
again
absolutely.
attributed to Nintendo, and it's great. It's such a mystery. There are some things that seem like they're going to be predictable in how it plays out, but there's other things that are serious questions in terms of the overall enjoyability of this film. Ultimately, I just want it to be a fun Mario film. Honestly, I want it to be something that will justify repeat viewings. I can't remember the last time I went to the movies and saw something that made me want to go see it multiple times. I didn't
The
even want to go
last the
see.
last the last one that was for me was Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Yeah, and that movie definitely deserved it. Even though I haven't seen it yet still, but I've only seen the clips, but I believe all of the praise it got just based off of those, because
That movie made me cry.
it sometimes you get a movie that's so good, and this is because I love Mario so much. I want it to succeed in every possible
Yeah,
metric.
absolutely.
I want it to succeed so badly. Like, I'm going in, I've got a Mario hat I'm gonna wear, and Mario T-shirt. I'm gonna wear those. I want to be as excited as maybe some of the kids that are there. Like, but ultimately there are reasons to be concerned because of the way Hollywood. It's not even just Hollywood being woke. It's the way that they make certain decisions.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I just want to see this thing be a fun and faithful Mario movie as much as it can. I can overlook Chris Pratt not being as great as long as he puts in the
Oh yeah.
effort. As long as he gives it his all, and you can tell he's giving it his all. It's gonna be harder for me to overlook them making Mario look like a fool for a long portion of the movie, and then him suddenly just doing a 180 and becoming super, because
Yeah.
I want it to feel like Mario is actually progressing as a character as we know him. And
And the other thing I'm really hoping is what we've seen. Like, I think there's a few like later like shots from the movie that are probably going to be like a midway point. But I really am. I'm crossing my fingers. I'm really hoping that pretty much everything we've seen from the trailers is in the first 20 to 30 minutes.
yeah, yeah, and I'm hoping that it is too. It looks like it could be a
I
fairly good length movie. At
I
least I
I
hope it
think
is.
the only thing that's probably, and I think this is like maybe 2/3 of the way into the film, is the Rainbow Road sequence.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
I think that's like, I don't even think that's close to the end. I think that's like a midway sequence point.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's
Um,
going to be interesting how that integrates into the actual story because I wasn't expecting anything Mario Kart related. I'm actually
right?
very surprised that they put anything Mario Kart related into it, and
Just
it
wait till we see
really,
Link show up.
it really feels like they're doing instead of they're taking the concept of worlds like because you've got in the Mario Brothers structure you've got world 1 1 like they're taking that world concept and meaning it to mean galaxies like Mario Galaxies.
So you
So
got to wonder, does this mean that we will see a Link?
I honestly wonder if there's not going to be a reference to Rosalina and the Lumas because we saw
Oh,
Pauline.
I bet we will see like that. That's much more plausible in my mind than Link. I'm just saying with like the whole Mario Kart side of it,
I
and
will
the
tell
fact
you this.
that we've seen Donkey Kong and those characters. Like that's the area where I'm like, okay, like I'm well aware like why they did that and the relationship with like Donkey Kong early on and all that in the
It
Mario
is
games.
it is very well established that even in Donkey Kong Country and 64 that Donkey Kong is in the same universe as Mario like consistently.
Yeah.
It's which is odd because once you get into Donkey Kong Country 1, 2 and 3 and 64, those are rare games as opposed to Nintendo having produced the original Donkey Kong featuring Mario, but I mean, yeah, you're right. That does make sense, but I will say this: the success of this movie, and it's gonna be successful. There's no way it isn't. I've heard people debating whether or not this movie is gonna make gangbusters. I think it's gonna do billions, and I think it's gonna kick off Nintendo exploring these other characters in their own projects. 100%. I think they'd be foolish not to.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that a Zelda movie wouldn't be brilliant.
Well, excuse me, princess.
We get to see that in full HD. Oh, if they don't do that, if they do a Zelda movie and that line isn't dropped in some way, shape, or form, I will walk out of the theater. Just point blank. It's like I don't even care about getting my ticket refund. I'll just walk out. It's like, no, you can't do a Zelda movie and not have that. This just be
Well,
great.
at least not one in like English. I don't think I don't know how like if that was in like
I
some of
could
the
see a
other
scenario
English games.
where Link and Zelda are having a conversation and she's being really grouchy and he sort of like says it under his breath and she goes, "What was that?" And he's like, "Oh, nope, nothing."
Yeah.
That'd be really great. But anyways, I figure we might as well wrap it up.
Yeah.
My final thoughts on this ultimately we'll have to wait and see. I don't
Yeah.
foresee this movie and bombing in any real way. I mean,
Oh, absolutely not.
I don't think
It's
it's gonna turn out to be just uber
here.
awful.
Here's the reason why it's not going to bomb. Put America aside for a second. This movie's going to blow up in Japan.
It's gonna blow up in Japan. It's gonna blow up anywhere. The Mario iconography is up there with stuff like Mickey
But
Mouse.
okay, so the reason I say that though is the world in general uh loves Mario, but Mario is a like at, like it's right up there with Pokemon.
Yeah,
Like you show up to the Osaka airport and you go out and the elevators have Princess Peach and Wario and Mario and Luigi on them.
yeah, and he was even gonna be, or I think he was a mascot at the Tokyo Olympics.
Yeah. And
So
so it's that sort of thing where like Mario is so deeply loved here in Japan, like it's going to be something that everyone here, like I can't imagine people not going and seeing like the amount like it's going to be one of those movies that people here go see multiple times. And Japan has such a large movie industry itself that it's going to be something where they're like, "Oh my goodness, this is amazing. Mario."
Oh, I should preface, because we didn't mention it before. You do actually live in Japan, in case anybody's wondering. That's why I mentioned
Yeah,
he has been in Japan for quite a while, so he has an
yeah, almost
understanding.
4 years.
Right, so he has more of an in-depth understanding of kind of how things would work over there. So, and I totally agree with him. And I think on the stage side of things, people have been talking for years in Mario circles about how just a natural fit the Mario universe is for an animated series, because people
Yeah,
do remember the Super Show, and while it wasn't the greatest, in modern day there's the Mario brand has only elevated since then. Like the Mario phenomenon blew up in the 80s when he first appeared, and into the 90s and so on, but
yeah,
particularly now with the Switch being just breaking all sorts of records, it's the timing couldn't have been more perfect. It's just the doubt that's there, I think, is just has to do with modern Hollywood more than anything else, and that's where our speculation and some of our concerns come
worries.
in. But I
Yeah,
don't think it's gonna be like, I don't think I'm gonna walk out of the theater on a Mario movie. I really don't think it's gonna be that bad. It's just, it might be a
no,
case where if it's not as good as the hype would make it up to be, that it'll just get mixed reception. It'll be like, well, here's what worked, here's what didn't, and then hopefully Nintendo learns from it. But ultimately, I think it's going to
yeah.
be a good. I think kids will enjoy it no matter what. I think Illumination knows how to do that. I think they know how to do that more than current Disney. So,
Just wait till they have the Nintendo Cinematic Universe where they build their way up to a Smash Brothers movie.
that, yeah, that's gonna. Phew, just, call me when there's a Metroid movie and when there's a Star Fox movie, because I will definitely go see those day one. I don't care who they
Oh,
cast in
the
those roles.
if they do a Star Fox movie and they have Crystal in that movie, the furry community
Oh dear gosh, you
is
had
going
to go
to
there.
lose it.
You had to
I
go
live
there.
with a furry. Yes.
Oh boy. Oh gosh, I'm not sleeping tonight. Uh
I'm just saying, like you think Mario's gonna make money? If they came out with Star Fox and Crystal was in it, that movie's gonna like just sell
why
so well.
why do furries have to ruin everything? I like that stuff because it was cool, not because they were anthropomorph. Whatever. But anyways, folks, that's gonna do it for this episode. I did want to apologize for kind of the way my voice was, because again, I've got this weird sort of congestion thing, and I know it's, at some points Artful kind of cut out a little bit, but that's not on either of ours end. I think that's just Discord. So hopefully everybody was able to hear everything smoothly. This isn't a uber professional setup and podcast, okay? That's why I could name it the Bad Gamepad Podcast Show thing. It's just kind of an everyman's conversation, and we hope you stuck around for it. I know this one was a little bit longer than usual, but as always, great to speak with you, and
Likewise.
hopefully we can do this again real soon. Maybe we can start to get on a schedule. Hopefully I start to feel better, and I could maybe go for a little longer, and hopefully some of the other members of Bad Gamepad will join in with us, and we can have something going. But I think this was a pretty good episode. If you're watching on or listening on YouTube, let us know in the comments down below what your thoughts are, some of the conversation, what you want to see with the Mario movie, what games you've been playing, that sort of thing. And if you're listening, thank you for listening. Really appreciate it. I think this will go up a day after I record it, because I've got to really get some sleep. I'm really starting to not feel great, but glad to have Artful Thinking on, and I guess we will see you guys in the next episode. This has been Super Koopa. God bless. Have a good one. See you later.